There is a road 18 miles north of Denver, Colorado, that locals speak of only in hushed tones. Not because it is particularly remote, not because it winds through dense wilderness or climbs some impassable mountain pass. They speak of it in hushed tones because of what happens there after dark, because of what people have seen, because of what people have heard, and because of those who drove down its 11 miles of cracked pavement and never came back the same. The road is called Riverdale Road, and if you have never heard of it, by the time this story ends, you will never forget it. Stretching from the suburb of Thornton to the small city of Brighton, Riverdale Road cuts through the flat, open terrain of Adams County like a scar. 11 miles of two-lane asphalt, poorly lit, wrapped in blind curves, flanked by cottonwood trees whose gnarled branches reach across the road like grasping hands. On a bright summer afternoon, it looks ordinary, a stretch of country road among thousands in the American West. Nothing to fear, nothing unusual. But something changes when the sun drops below the Rocky Mountains. Something shifts. The shadows here do not simply grow longer. They move, they breathe, they wait. Law enforcement in Thornton will tell you, matter-of-factly, that they receive regular calls from Riverdale Road, calls about strange sightings, unexplained encounters, drivers pulling over in panic, unable to explain what just appeared in their headlights or what appeared in their rearview mirror. For years, these calls have continued. For decades, the legends have grown. And today, Riverdale Road has earned a title that no road in this country wants to hold. It has been called, by multiple paranormal researchers and media outlets, the most haunted road in America. That claim does not come without reason. This road is not haunted by a single ghost, a single legend, a single tragic accident. It is haunted by layers, by history soaked in blood and fire, by a land whose ground remembers every dark thing that was ever done upon it, and by at least 8 distinct documented legends, 8 separate reasons to keep your doors locked, your windows up, and your eyes forward as you drive. To understand why this road is the way it is, you have to go back, way back. Back to 1859, when a wave of gold-hungry settlers, an estimated 100,000 strong, descended upon Colorado's Pikes Peak region. Among them was a man from Ohio named David Wolpert. He had heard the stories, he had believed the promise. He traveled west with everything he owned, passing through New Mexico, climbing toward Pikes Peak, crossing the mountains to Blue River near Breckenridge, where he and a party of 16 men began prospecting for gold. But the land would not give up its treasure easily. Driven out by hostile encounters with Native Americans, Wolpert and his party retreated. He eventually made his way to Denver, a rough, desperate city in those days, and made a different kind of decision. He chose to farm. In the early 1860s, Wolpert preempted a stretch of land along the South Platte River, 9 miles north of Denver, and began what would become one of the finest farms in Adams County. By 1864, he had constructed a remarkable 2-story brick mansion at what is now 9190 Riverdale Road, a home befitting a man of ambition and permanence. He married a woman named Catherine Henderson that same year. They had 3 children. They built a life on land that, by all appearances, had been claimed, tamed, and made respectable. But the land beneath Wolpert's mansion had a memory of its own. Long before European settlers arrived, this stretch of the South Platte River Valley was Native American territory. The tribes who lived here did not simply occupy the land, they revered it, and they believed, with a certainty that no amount of Western progress could undo, that certain pieces of ground were sacred, that certain places, once disturbed, would never rest again. Elders warned that the flat, open corridor between Thornton and Brighton sat on ground that had witnessed suffering, battles, burials, ritual, ground that had been soaked with blood long before any settler drove a stake into it, ground that, if you built upon it and forgot its past, it would make you pay. David Wolpert did not know this, or perhaps he did not care. He built his mansion, he raised his family, he died in 1909 at the age of 75 and was buried at Riverside Cemetery in Denver. Catherine followed 6 years later, and then the mansion moved on without them, changed hands, changed purpose, changed meaning. By the 1920s, it had reportedly become a gambling den. At some point, it was used as a brothel. The stories say one owner became so drunk during a card game that he wagered the mansion itself and lost. A murder was committed somewhere on the property, the details swallowed by time. One dark chapter after another, written into the walls of a house that had once been a home. And then came the night of November 28, 1975. At approximately 1 a.m, the witching hour, locals will note, the old brick mansion at 9190 Riverdale Road caught fire. By the time the flames were through, the entire structure had been consumed. Only fragments of walls remained, standing like teeth in an open mouth. The Denver Post reported on December 4th of that year that the blaze had left virtually nothing. The cause of the fire? Undetermined. No arrests were ever made, no definitive explanation was ever given. The building had been vacant, declared a fire hazard months earlier, tenants evicted in the spring. But something was inside that night. Something started that fire, and whatever dark energy lived within those walls, it did not burn away with the timber and the brick. It stayed. It seeped into the 11 miles of road that passed in front of where the mansion once stood, and it has never left. But here is what no one tells you about the fire. Here is what makes the story darker. There are those who believe the mansion did not simply burn. There are those who believe something was done inside those walls before the flames started. Rituals had already been reported near the site. Pentagrams had been carved into the bark of the cottonwood trees that line the road. Remnants of ritual circles, burned candles, scattered bones, symbols drawn in ash on the ground had been discovered in the fields surrounding the property. The locals had a name for what gathered in this place. They called it something that practiced the darkest of arts. And when the mansion finally burned, some believed it was not the end of what lived there. It was an invitation, a doorway blown open by fire and blood and a century of accumulated darkness. A doorway that to this day has never been closed.
Close your eyes for a moment. Not for long. Just long enough to imagine yourself behind the wheel on a moonless night. Your headlights push back about 50 feet of darkness before the road swallows itself in shadow. The cottonwood trees on either side are tall and close. Their branches don't just brush the edge of the road, they overhang it. The wind moves through them with a sound that is almost, but not quite, like breathing. There are no street lights, there are no gas stations, there are no other cars. Just you, the hum of your engine, and 11 miles of Riverdale Road stretching out ahead of you, quiet and dark and patient. Now imagine that your windows begin to fog over, not from the outside, from the inside, and as you reach to wipe the condensation away, your hand stops before it touches the glass, because pressed into that fog, slowly, deliberately, unmistakably, is the outline of a handprint. 5 fingers, a palm, small, deliberate, clear, and it is not yours. This is not a horror movie scene invented for your entertainment. This is one of the most consistently reported paranormal experiences on Riverdale Road. Motorists, many of them skeptics who had never believed in the supernatural before that night, have pulled over shaking, unable to explain what they just witnessed. The handprint in the fog, the tap on the window, a sound that comes from outside the glass, deliberate and rhythmic, at a spot no passing branch could reach, and then, sometimes, a figure, just beyond the reach of the headlights, running. The story of the Phantom Jogger is one of the oldest and most deeply embedded legends of Riverdale Road. Somewhere along the road's dark stretch, there is a hill that the locals quietly refer to as Jogger's Hill. The name comes from a real event. A man, a jogger, was out running along the road when a car struck him at speed. The driver did not stop, did not call for help, did not slow down. He left the man's body on the pavement and drove away into the dark, never identified, never charged. The jogger died there, alone, on a road with no witnesses and no lights. That was his first death. His second has never ended. Those who know the road say you will hear him before you see him, a sound that defies easy explanation, not quite footsteps, not quite a heartbeat, but something between the two, a rhythmic pounding that seems to come from just outside your door, keeping pace with your car. Then the tapping begins, hard knuckle raps against the glass. If you are alone in the car, they will feel viscerally, personally directed at you. And if you stop, if you make the mistake of slowing down and rolling down your window to see who is there, the warnings say you may not drive away. The Phantom Jogger, according to those who study this road's legends, is not at peace. He is not looking for comfort or closure. He is looking for the driver who killed him. And in the darkness of Riverdale Road, where faces are hard to see and guilt is impossible to prove, anyone who stops becomes a candidate for his rage. Paranormal investigators who have walked this road at night report an almost tangible shift in the atmosphere as they approach Joggers Hill. Some describe it as pressure, others describe it as weight, as though the air itself becomes heavier. Equipment malfunctions, cameras lose their feed, recording devices capture sounds that were not audible to the human ear during the walk, low tones, fragmented rhythms, something that, when slowed down and isolated, sounds disturbingly like the impact of a body against metal. But the Phantom Jogger is only one of the bed who walk this road. There is a boy, a small boy, who every morning used to make the same journey to school along Riverdale Road. The story does not give his name, and perhaps it is better that way. Better that some piece of this child remains private, unmarked, protected from the highway of history that has claimed everything else about him. What the story does tell us is this. One morning, a car came around one of the road's many blind curves and struck him. He was killed, and whatever link exists between a violent, unexpected death and the road on which it occurs had tied this child to Riverdale Road forever. Drivers have noticed it first on the road signs. In the glow of their headlights, they have seen what at first appear to be smudges on the reflective green panels. And then they slow down, or they pass close enough to see, and the smudges take shape. Small, round, deliberate. The handprints of a child, pressed into the surface of the signs, as though the boy still makes his morning commute, still reaches up, still touches the markers of the road that took him, still trying, in whatever way a ghost can try, to make someone pay attention to where he is. And then there is the woman. She appears without warning, a figure in white, long dress, pale against the darkness, standing at the edge of the road, or moving along the shoulder with a slow, purposeful stride that seems just slightly wrong, out of time, out of pace. Drivers who have seen her describe the same experience. She appears suddenly, far too close to the car, close enough that they hit the brakes in panic. And then she's gone. Not gone like a person who stepped back, gone like a candle flame in a sudden wind, there and then not there. Some have seen her step directly into the path of their vehicle, braced for impact, and felt nothing, heard nothing, as though she passed through the car itself. Who is she? The theories are layered and dark. Some say she is simply another victim of the road's accidents, a woman struck and killed at night who cannot comprehend that she is dead. Others say she is something older, something tied to the burning mansion, something tied to the last chapter of the Wolpert Mansion that no one wants to speak about too directly. Because the legend of what happened in that mansion before it burned, the full version, the one that does not appear in the sanitized retellings, involves her. And that story you need to hear from the beginning. After the Wolpert family was gone, the mansion that David Wolpert built with his own hands passed through ownership that grew progressively darker. The gambling, the drinking, the violence, these were reported and half-documented. What is harder to pin down, harder to trace, and infinitely harder to dismiss is what began to happen on the property in its final years. Because somewhere between the day the tenants were evicted in the spring of 1975 and the night the mansion burned in November of that same year, something else was using that building. The trees near the property had been marked.
Deep carvings, some fresh and some old, cut into the bark of the cottonwood trees along Riverdale Road in patterns too deliberate, too symmetrical to be the work of bored teenagers. Pentagrams, inverted symbols, circles that enclosed smaller shapes within their rings, marked with a precision that suggested not casual mischief, but practiced ritual. Around the ruins of the property, investigators found burned-down candles placed in circular arrangements. Bones, some animal, some whose origin was harder to determine, arranged with a care that suggested ceremony. The residents of the area had reported gatherings at night, fires visible through the dark, the sound of voices raised in unison, in cadences that were neither singing nor speaking, but something between the two. There are those in Adams County who will tell you that a community of practitioners of the occult were using that property in its final abandoned years. Whether this is true in any provable sense matters less, perhaps, than what it represents. A site already built on contested ground, already stained by violence and death, being deliberately invoked, deliberately activated, as though someone knew what the land held and wanted to open it further. And the iron gates at the front of the property, the large, ornate iron gates that had once marked the entrance of the Wolpert Mansion with the dignity of a prosperous frontier homestead, began to take on new meaning. People started calling them something else, not the gates of a mansion, not the gates of a farm, something altogether different. They called them the gates of hell. The name spread quickly, the way dark names always do, and with the name came the stories. Because after the mansion burned, after the structure itself was gone, after the trees were cleared, after the property was eventually absorbed into what is today the Pelican Ponds open space, the gates did not disappear cleanly. People kept seeing them, not consistently, not reliably, but persistently. Drivers would round a bend on Riverdale Road and swear they saw two tall iron gates standing alone at the roadside, opening to nothing. No wall, no fence, no building beyond them, just the gates standing in the dark, their ironwork catching headlights in a way that made them look almost alive. And then, on the next pass, or the next night, or the next visit, they were gone. There are those who say the gates of hell do not have a fixed location, that they appear to specific people at specific times, that there is something about the state of mind of a particular driver, something about their fear or their openness or their vulnerability that makes the gates visible. Others say the gates are always there. It is only that most of us are not paying attention in the right way at the right moment with the right kind of sight. But whether or not you can see the gates, there is something else on Riverdale Road that no amount of skepticism has fully explained away. Something that has been encountered by dozens of separate people, many of whom share similar descriptions without having coordinated their stories, many of whom came to this road for the first time and had no prior knowledge of its legends. A car. Not just any car, a Camaro. A black Camaro from the early 1970s, with one headlight burning and the other dark, a single eye cutting through the blackness of the road behind you. If you have driven Riverdale Road at night, you may have encountered what you assumed was simply a reckless driver riding too close. The vehicle appears suddenly, filling your rearview mirror, close enough to make you tense. It does not pull back, it does not pass, it presses. And then, in some accounts, it begins to move alongside you, gradually pulling up to your driver's side window, matching your speed exactly, that single headlight burning in your peripheral vision like a beacon from somewhere you do not want to go. The story behind the Phantom Camaro is, like so many stories on this road, rooted in a real death. In the 1970s, a driver in a Camaro misjudged one of Riverdale Road's many blind curves and was killed in the crash. He was young, by all accounts, he was fast, and the road, as it has done with so many before and after him, absorbed his death and held on to it, absorbed the speed, the recklessness, the violence of the impact, and returned it years and decades later in the form of a car that should not exist anymore, driven by someone who should not be driving. The Thornton Police Department is not unaware of these stories. They have responded to enough calls. A woman reported in late 2024 that she and a friend were driving the road at night and noticed headlights immediately behind them, directly on their bumper, with no explanation for how any car had followed them onto the isolated stretch without being visible on their recording. They had been filming continuously. Their recording showed nothing behind them, no car, no lights, just the empty road. And yet both of them had seen it. Both of them had felt it. And when they reached the end of the road and the headlights vanished without a car passing them or turning off, they pulled over and sat in silence for a very long time. But all of this, the jogger, the child, the lady in white, the phantom car, is still not the deepest layer of what lives on Riverdale Road. Because beneath all of the documented legends and eyewitness accounts, there is something older, something that predates the Wolpert Mansion, predates the gold rush, predates every European foot that ever set down on this particular stretch of ground along the South Platte River. Something that the first people of this land knew to leave alone. And what happens when that ancient force and the layers of human violence stacked above it finally begin to bleed together? That is the part of this story that will stay with you longest.
The Native American tribes who inhabited the South Platte River Valley before European settlement did not simply live in this landscape. They were part of it in ways that most modern minds struggle to fully comprehend. The land was not property, it was relationship. Every hill, every bend in the river, every stretch of flat prairie between the mountains had meaning, spiritual, historical, ancestral. And certain places were understood to carry particular power, power that was not benign, power that demanded respect. The land that Riverdale Road runs through was known among some of these communities as a place to be treated with great care. There are accounts, preserved imperfectly in the margins of local history, that speak of the corridor between Thornton and Brighton as ground where the boundary between the living world and whatever lies beyond it was unusually thin, where the dead did not always stay on their side of that boundary, where shapeshifters, those beings known in various native traditions by names that translate loosely as skinwalkers, were said to move freely in the night. Paranormal researchers who have spent time on Riverdale Road report something that does not fit neatly into the categories of ghost or specter or residual haunting. People who have walked the road at its darkest hours, the hours between 3 and 4 in the morning, which many investigators call the witching hour, when the natural human body is at its most vulnerable and the perceptual threshold for the uncanny is at its lowest, describe seeing shapes in the fields beside the road that do not move like animals, that do not move like people, that move in ways that belong to neither category, shifting between silhouettes, standing and then not standing, visible and then absorbed into the darkness before the eye can fully register what it has seen. In 2023, a pair of paranormal investigators brought equipment to Riverdale Road in the early morning hours. They walked the full 11 miles with recording devices, electromagnetic field meters, and audio capture equipment sensitive enough to register frequencies the human ear cannot detect. Their audio recordings, reviewed afterward, contained sounds that had been inaudible during the walk, a low, rhythmic vibration in the section near where the Wolpert Mansion once stood, a sharp, repeated impact sound, like a fist against glass, in the area described as Jogger's Hill, and, most disturbingly, a voice, brief, fragmented. Playing back at normal speed, it was almost recognizable as speech. When the investigators slowed it to half speed and filtered it, they heard 3 words with sufficient clarity to be fairly certain of what they had captured. They never published what those 3 words were. That is the thing about Riverdale Road that separates it from most haunted places in America.
Other haunted locations are discrete: a single house, a single cemetery, a single battlefield. The haunting is contained, contextualized, bound to a specific site and a specific story. Riverdale Road does not work that way. The haunting here is diffuse. It runs the full 11 miles. It is layered: Native American burial ground beneath a settler's mansion, beneath decades of violence and occult practice, beneath a mysterious fire, beneath the accumulated weight of real fatal accidents. Each layer does not replace the last. Each layer adds to it, compresses against it. And what that compression produces is something that cannot be cleanly categorized, cannot be fully explained, and cannot, if the reports of the last several decades are to be taken seriously, be ignored. There is a woman who worked as a volunteer at an animal rescue facility located along Riverdale Road. She was outside one afternoon, not at night, not in the witching hour, but in the ordinary light of the afternoon, when she caught a glimpse of movement near the tree line, a figure. Long white dress, moving with the kind of slow deliberateness she immediately registered as wrong, not in an obvious way, just slightly, unsettlingly wrong, the way something seen from the corner of your eye registers before your rational mind can dismiss it. She turned to look directly. The figure was there for half a second more, and then it was gone. She checked the tree line. She walked the perimeter. She found no one. She was not the kind of person who told ghost stories. She told this one. Consider also the family who drove Riverdale Road on an autumn night and witnessed what they described as a figure standing motionless near a tree, watching them pass. Both passengers in the front of the vehicle saw it clearly enough to confirm the sighting to each other. The passenger in the back saw nothing. Before they reached the end of the road, they encountered emergency vehicles, a fire truck and a police car positioned at the roadside where a vehicle had driven off the edge of the embankment. The smell of smoke was thick in the air. The accident appeared to have just occurred. There was no one among the emergency responders who could tell them anything about what they had seen near the tree. This is Riverdale Road, not a single story, a convergence of them, a place where the past does not fade into memory but presses itself against the present with a persistence that no amount of suburban development, no amount of parks and open spaces built over old ruins has ever managed to diminish. The gates of hell, that name the locals gave to the iron gates of a burning mansion, was never just about the Wolpert estate. It was about everything that was already there when Wolpert arrived, everything that watched him build his mansion on their ground, everything that watched the mansion burn, everything that is still watching. If you drive Riverdale Road tonight, you may see nothing. Many people do. They make the 11 miles with no incident, reach Brighton or Thornton with nothing more than the memory of a dark and quiet country road. But then there are the others, the ones who come back changed, the ones who pulled over and sat for a long time before they could bring themselves to start driving again, the ones whose recordings captured things they cannot explain, the ones who felt something press against their window, slow and deliberate, at a section of road where no living person could have been standing. And what every single one of those people shares, what every witness, every investigator, every skeptic who became a believer on this road shares, is the absolute certainty that whatever is on Riverdale Road is not random. It knows you are there. It has always known, and it is patient in the way that only something very old, something that has watched generations of the living pass through its territory, can truly be patient. The road between Thornton and Brighton is 11 miles long. There are no shortcuts, no alternate routes that avoid the full stretch. If you enter it, you must drive all 11 miles before you are out. And somewhere in those 11 miles, somewhere between the hill where the jogger fell and the place where the mansion's iron gates still sometimes appear to those with the wrong kind of luck, somewhere in those 11 miles, the road is waiting for you to slow down, waiting for you to look too long in the rearview mirror, waiting for the moment when curiosity overrides instinct and you roll down your window window to see what is tapping on the glass. Paranormal investigators advise, if you must go, do not go alone. Do not stop the car. Do not roll down the windows. Do not, under any circumstances, drive past midnight. Because after midnight, according to everyone who has studied this road, something changes. The temperature drops in ways that the Colorado plains cannot fully account for. The sounds from the fields are no longer identifiable as wind or animals. The shadows beside the road begin to move in directions that shadows do not move. And sometimes, not always, but often enough that the warning is taken seriously by people who have spent careers studying the unexplained, a single headlight appears in the rearview mirror, close behind you, keeping pace, not passing, waiting to see what you will do. Drive Riverdale Road tonight if you feel you must, but understand what you are driving toward. Understand that 11 miles of American asphalt can hold within its dark, its history, its silence, the accumulated weight of 160 years of violence, fire, occult practice, and restless death. The gates the locals named after the worst place they could imagine were never just about the Wolpert estate. It was about everything that was already there when Wolpert arrived, everything that watched him build his mansion on their ground, everything that watched the mansion burn, everything that is still watching. If you drive Riverdale Road tonight, you may see nothing. Many people do. They make the 11 miles with no incident, reach Brighton or Thornton with nothing more than the memory of a dark and quiet country road. But then there are the others, the ones who come back changed, the ones who pulled over and sat for a long time before they could bring themselves to start driving again, the ones whose recordings captured things they cannot explain, the ones who felt something press against their window, slow and deliberate, at a section of road where no living person could have been standing. And what every single one of those people shares, what every witness, every investigator, every skeptic who became a believer on this road shares, is the absolute certainty that whatever is on Riverdale Road is not random. It knows you are there. It has always known, and it is patient in the way that only something very old, something that has watched generations of the living pass through its territory,